Hello and welcome to the Easy Government webinar on efficiency, effectiveness and cost control in local government. My name is Kim Williams and I'm one of the founders of Easy Government, which is all about building government leaders and great government leaders. So what I wanted to talk about in this webinar today was efficiency, effectiveness and cost control in local government. My background is I'm an accountant by trade, but worked in two large councils in South Australia in governance and also managing capital work and contractor roles. Very much enjoyed my time in local government, and we now have a business called BRS that provides consulting services back to local government in the areas of leadership, team and culture, strategy, business planning and a whole range of other areas. So we'll get started in the webinar, and what I look forward to doing is talking you through this topic. It's a challenging one at the moment, particularly given the fact that a lot of councils are going through a lot of change. And it reminds me of one of my favourite quotes, which is, "It's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives, it's the one that's most adaptable to change," from Charles Darwin. And there is a lot of change that's going on in local government, and a lot of change that's not just happening in local government, but in society and in other levels of government that's having an impact on local government. So this notion of change, not only in terms of the fact that business and communities are changing, but we need to change and we need to actually manage people through that change. And particularly in this area, as we're being asked more and more to do more with less. More and more with less is going to be a strong theme within this webinar. So one of the real never-ending challenges is, how do we manage costs and deliver services efficiently and effectively in a way that actually means that we're demonstrating value for money? So there's one part that relates to that, but the other half is not just managing and delivering the costs, it's actually also demonstrating to elected members in the community that you're actively doing this. And I think this is a very important point. It's important to be able to demonstrate that you're actually actively doing it. So how do you go about demonstrating this? How do you, as a management team member or a member of your local government, actually do this? And I guess what this webinar will talk through is, you need to adapt an approach and adopt an approach which is logical and systematic. It's not just reactive or just one-off. Nothing worse than just doing some one-off service reviews that actually don't get undertaken in a structured way. It can be embedded into the cycle of council business, and that's not just through your strategic and business planning, but in the way that you also do your financial management. And it becomes part of the routine in the way you go about your work. So all these elements are really, really critical to make sure that we're successful in the way that we actually manage this effectively. So one of the things that I'll focus on in this webinar is that I firmly believe that the local government manager's mindset, so anyone that's a manager in local government, the actual mindset is the key. You'll never develop a culture of cost consciousness which directly relates to efficiency and effectiveness unless managers accept it's their job to manage costs. They also understand the link between commercial management planning and cost consciousness, and managers are actually educated in this area and have the tools to manage costs, because a lot of perception is it's the finance manager's job, or the asset management team have the biggest budget, I don't need to worry about cost consciousness. I have a completely different view on this. I think every manager in local government needs to be more commercially aware, needs to be more cost conscious, but they need the tools and the systems and the support to be able to implement this. So talking this through, for me, in my mind, there's three related concepts which need to be understood by council managers. One is efficiency and effectiveness, one is allocative efficiency, and the last one is cost control. So we're going to go through these in this webinar. So efficiency normally relates to the technical or process efficiency, and it's really that relationship between the inputs and the outputs. And so the way I try and explain efficiency is, how can we make sure that we're more efficient to generate more outputs for the same inputs, e.g. lower unit cost, or in the case of local government, utilise less resources to produce the same outcomes for our government, and not only the same outcomes for stakeholders and communities, which means lower unit costs and also that it's cheaper in absolute terms as well. The other one that's really important is effectiveness. So efficiency is one side of it, which is about being efficient. Effectiveness refers to the ability to satisfy the needs of the service users, i.e. the customers. So again, this balance of efficiency and effectiveness is the first piece of the puzzle. Allocative efficiency is a slightly different concept. It's about making sure, I believe, how well are we using council's resources to address the most important community needs. And so for a council's management team, this means the ability to respond to the challenging needs of the community by applying resources and effort to address these needs in a timely and efficient manner. And I really think this is a great question to ask, and it's something to think about, for any council, is are the resources that we're using being used to address the most important community's needs? Because allocative efficiency is this whole notion that your resources are finite, your energy is finite, the number of people you've got is finite. So how well do we make sure that our strategic planning and our business planning processes are actually enabling our managers to adjust our efforts and resources to make sure we alter the range of services offered to make sure we meet the community needs? So this is a great question to ask, and it's a great question to reflect upon when you're thinking about how efficient and effective you are as a council. The last concept that I talked about, and I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this because this is a very hot topic at the moment in local government, is cost control. So I have a strong belief that council's management team must be able to show their proficiency in managing costs. This means that they need to show, and that I mean show in terms of providing evidence, that they are diligently making every possible effort to reduce costs and not simply avoid the hard work and expecting ratepayers to foot the bill. And this is very important. Every organisation, whether they're public and private sector, are going through challenging times in terms of wanting to do more with less. To me, local government's not immune from that. We need to be really efficient, we need to be really effective, but we also need to be able to demonstrate to our elected members in our community that we're actually really driving for value for money. We're trying to do more with less, and more importantly, we're very open and transparent in the way that we do that. So, in terms of how we can approach this challenge, as I mentioned before, it needs to be thorough and it needs to adopt a systematic approach to improving the efficiency and effectiveness of our services. We need to make sure we actually, in the first place, anchor the process by making sure we've got a clear idea of what drives the council's costs. This naturally then will lead into looking at how efficient we are and how effective we are. And again, we need to make sure that we've got the flexibility to respond to the changes that the community demand in terms of services. So where do you start? I think you start by developing a common understanding within your management team of what drives your council costs. And I'll tell a little story here because I think it's important. We did some work late last year with a council, a reasonably large council. And we actually got a survey out to the management team and asked them a series of questions around the cost of the council. And I was absolutely staggered with the responses around the fact that it's not everyone's responsibilities to manage costs, it's the finance managers. We don't need to worry about costs. They didn't know what their top 3 costs were. They weren't sure what the rateable average rate was. It just really highlighted to me how commercially deficient this management team was. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that you can only really, I believe, focus on cost by having a firm foundation of where your costs are, but also looking at some of the costs at a corporate level and making sure you understand which of these corporate costs could we look to rationalise or get better value money for. But in order to do that, you've got to understand your costs. So the first thing you're going to do is actually analyse your costs and what drives your costs, and we'll talk a little bit about what drives your costs in a minute. Utilise workshops to actually get a shared understanding of what some of the issues are in relation to cost, service efficiency and service effectiveness. And one of the key things I think then is to agree priorities to improve services and what I call the efficiency of the services at a corporate level and also at a local level. So I'm going to go into it a little bit and a little bit of detail as to what you do. So first thing, I believe that cost management should be managed as part of your business planning, strategic planning cycle. So looking at making sure that you provide the knowledge about what the major costs and what drives the major costs at that level. Because what we want to do is be able to produce forward estimates in saying, well, look, this is where our costs are, this is where those costs are being driven, this is where the current trends are taking us. So not just the forward estimates, but if we translate the current data into past performance and forward estimates, you start to see trends, and trends tell you where the costs are going to end up. So if I start with a first principle, just simple thing like in local government, generally the top three costs. Now, I'm not suggesting this might be the same for your council, but the three top costs are wages and salaries, depreciation, and generally your large contracts like waste management. They account for a significant portion of your costs. So if those are your top three costs, you've got to understand what drives them. So I've got an example here of wages and salaries as an example. And you'll notice what we've done here, and we do this as part of the work, and it'll be part of Easygovernment in terms of providing this type of information. Wages are driven by your numbers and your increase in your rates. So your numbers of people in terms of vacancies filled, vacancies left, new jobs, productivity improvements, and your rates are your award agreements, your EB agreements, a level of appointment, the increments, whether or not others can do the work. You've got to understand, because then you'll get to the point where you're able to identify the controls that will enable you to manage those costs effectively. And even further than that, you've got your costs, you've got your drivers, but you've got to also be able to look at what past trends will tell you where the forward estimate's going to end up. And you'll see here, if you look at this example, you've got looking back, this is what the costs were. Looking forward, this is where the forecast is going to be. And what does that actually mean in terms of where our costs currently are? So some of the key tips once you've got that information, and don't get me wrong, you need to do a fair bit of analysis as a council to get that information, is you need to set specific targets for the entire management team. E.g., we're all going to find 3% of cost per savings annually. And just a tip on that, I do believe it needs to be a shared 3% with the management team. It can't just be the person with the biggest budget. It's got to be a shared, because guess what? You need to be united around cost management. You can't chuck bombs over the fence and say, oh, that's up to engineering, or that's up to asset management, or that's up to the capital work program. We need to use a bottom-up rather than top-down budgeting process. You need to make sure that the finance team are not the people that are responsible for managing costs. They're responsible for educating and facilitating cost management, and they're also making sure that they're making it clear that the responsibility for controlling costs must be owned by all managers. But the finance team have to educate and assist. So, set a target. Make sure it's meaningful, challenging and relevant. And one of the challenges that I always try and say to a council is, look at your CPI, look at your local government price index, work towards that as a saving. And that way what you're doing is offsetting at least the CPI increase. And it's a great target for the management team to have. Focus on your top three costs. Look at your top three costs in each of the business units and apply it to all managers, and look at the cost drivers that come behind it. Once you've got an understanding of those costs, agree an annual program of service and cost reviews. Focus on specific areas. Make sure you've got a prioritised program with the audit committee or your governance function. Make sure it's driven by the outcome, not just by the target, and focus on driving towards your targets. And what I mean by that, reporting against it, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And just in terms of priorities, I really like this value matrix, the valuelease matrix, which is where can we actually have the highest value in terms of looking at opportunities to save money or be more efficient and effective, and what's easier. So, you want to target the low-hanging fruit, which is your highest priorities. You also want to then, in the top left, look at those ones that are still high value, but implement over time. Because the quick wins, or the highest low-hanging fruit priorities, are the ones, in my opinion, that demonstrate confidence to the rest of the council that you're actually on the right track. Make sure you monitor costs and report on progress, so publish forward estimates. Set the annual budget and business plan targets based on those. And I believe cost management should be a standing item on agendas for leadership team and management team meetings in councils, because I really believe then what gets measured gets improved, and people know that it's not going to be something that we just do once and then hold back. We actually make sure that we're doing it on a regular basis. I like this one here too. This is a what you call a waterfall, which basically explains, for example, total salary costs on the right hand side, what makes up that entire amount of money. And you'll look at it. What you'll see here, you've got your base salary costs, and then you get increment increases, vacant positions, overtime, new positions, CPI increases. You can start to tone in on areas like new positions. Do we really need to fill all those new positions? Vacant positions. Is there an opportunity for it to be done by our existing staff? Now, the difference between the base salary cost of 22 million and the total salary cost of 38, You look at the numbers on this, it's really significant in terms of the difference, in terms of those little 5% savings that you can save. So the fact that this is reported in the way it's reported in a waterfall enables you to quickly scan and identify where you can actually save some money. Make sure that you're actually reporting progress on actions, who's doing what, by when, what's the saving, and when's it going to happen. And again, I think this is this whole notion of what gets measured gets improved. One of the other areas that I think is very important is it's okay to do the task of identifying savings and looking at cost management, but it doesn't mean a lot if you don't engage staff and you don't clarify roles and responsibilities around commercial outcomes. I think it's particularly important to actually make sure staff understand the bigger picture about what they do and how it contributes to the bigger picture and why it's important. So again, very important that you actually engage staff around the fact that being commercially astute and making sure we're managing our costs effectively is not a dirty word. We're all in this together and we're all trying to be as efficient and effective as we can for our community, our ratepayers and our stakeholders and elected members. So just in terms of following that up, making sure that you're reporting on that progress on cost management, making sure that you've got detailed quarterly reviews of your budgets and actuals to anticipate savings, reporting progress to the council, making it public. To me, that is the acid test. What are you doing to make sure that the council get confidence that you're managing costs effectively? Because guess what? Once they know that, they have confidence in the administration that you're trying to be as prudent as possible, but at the same time still delivering services, necessary services to the community. So as I said, a little bit around the action planning. This is one way of doing it to the council, where you have your profit and loss line item. What action or efficiency are we taking? What location? What's the target date? What's the saving opportunity and who's responsible for it? This is just a tool and template, and it's part of the tools and templates we provide in Easy Government. So just the final thing I just wanted to highlight was just how important I believe a communication plan is. This is all about making sure you account for the effort and the outcomes and ensure accountability. So this is a communication plan that actually engages your elected members, your key stakeholders, your key residents and the community. And I think this is particularly important to make sure that we actually take people along for the journey. So there's no point doing all this fantastic cost management work if we're actually not taking people along for the journey. So the communication plan, for me, needs to address the fact that cost management is a sensitive issue. Many stakeholders, including staff, may see effort to improve efficiency as an excuse for shedding jobs. And I want to stress, I don't think that should be the intent at all. I think it's about doing more with less. So I think you've actually got to acknowledge and address these concerns from the outset and prepare and implement a communications plan to accompany any initiatives to allay those concerns and make sure people understand that, hang on a minute, we're not doing this because we're trying to lose jobs. We're actually just trying to demonstrate value for money and highlight that we're actually being very prudent with their money. So thank you very much for the opportunity to provide that webinar. I hope you got some value out of it. Easy Government is an exciting initiative where we'll have a whole range of different webinars like this, best practice tools, templates, blogs, articles and member content areas where you can actually interact with other government leaders. We look forward to you being part of the program. Go to easygovernment.com.au to find more out about this exciting initiative and also register your interest as we look to launch this in February 2014. Look forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for the opportunity. Thank you.